Filth. What is filth? And no, I'm not talking about the contents of my old homework folder. I'm talking about the slop, the grime, and the stench that I, as a gamer, am all too familiar with.
Last night, I ended what happened to be the longest streak that I've ever had of not taking a shower. About a month and a half.
Recently, I've sold my soul to Papa Nurgle, the Lord of Filth, who has absolved me of my sins and freed me from my crippling pain and fear of the cold embrace of death. In return, I have accepted a life of unopposed rot, decay, and stench. So that's why today we're cornering the filth market by eliminating our top competitors, the putrid, rotting vampires of the Caravan of Roses, and our main rivals, the vile vermin that are the Skaven factions.
We're the rats.
It won't be enough to beat our competitors simply through corporate sabotage alone, but also by spreading our toxic slop and stench around the map in the form of our handcrafted artisanal plagues, now with extra tuberculosis. So to successfully outslop our competitors by microdosing the population with our addictive plagues, and guaranteeing repeat customers for life, however long that actually is,
You are dead! Not a big surprise!
we will be playing as Kugath, the Plague Father, partly because I'm too broke to afford the other lords, but also because he has a sick gaming chair. We start by beta testing our obscene creations on the first faction we run into, who just so happen to be the Lizardmen. Our first goal was to take over the Lizardmen's forts and capture our first province. Now, I'm assuming the lizards must have been precognitive to their inevitable genocide when they chose to build in a Mayan architectural style. Such premonitions seem to have made the lizards apathetic to their own demise, as they barely put up a fight while we stop them into a fine lizardy mush. And so I don my 16th century Mauryan helmet and get ready to LARP as the Spaniards. Next, I dismiss my plague drones.
No, wait!
They're good, but their cost of 375 favour per turn massively outweighs their use, especially early on. So instead, I recruit a plague beast and 6 squads of Nurglings. And now, with a pretty formidable force, I begin to take a few of the Lizardmen's strongholds. With the first settlement captured, I hired a couple of lords so that I could start leveling them early into my campaign. I heat up the stove and get my first plague cooking.
Someone cooked here.
We're going to start light with some basic palsy in order to inflict -4 melee attack on our cold-blooded friends.
Estaba recontento porque había llegado.
This will give us the slight edge we need to beat them. Continuing our oppression, we capture another city, and now with enough experience and a formidable army, we prepare to take the final city in the province. But first, I pass one of my lords, Adipus, between Kugath and the other lords in order to spread STDs around. This act of sexual hedonism is known as the Plague Dance, and not only does it give experience to the exchanged unit, but it also provides a chance to develop new plague symptoms. And so our plague mutated, and we unlocked our first plague, greenpox, which alongside improving our settlement growth and chance of a plague spreading, also includes brain fog, which lowers base weapon damage. Thankfully, the Lizardmen are avid anti-vaxxers, and so we inflict them with our green slime and siege their final settlement. Up until this point, I had been playing strategically, coordinating my army for the best chance of success. But here I realized it was better to mindlessly clump my units into a disgusting green blob to serve as a shield of thick, gooey flesh for the Lizardmen to carve through. With my 900 IQ military tactic learned, we secured yet another victory and had now captured every city in the province. With our first province captured, we could issue a province commandment. I chose the Plague God's Pasture because I'm a little plague-pilled sickness cell, and this commandment increases our plague's duration and chance of spreading drastically. Now we have rendered our starting province into a comically large petri dish from which I can mass produce my various rot, bacteria, and filth rot. So naturally I call up fellow member of the Filth Guild and my personal rivals, Clan Carrier, in order to brag about my growing stakes in the filth industry.
Let me talk, shut up, right, all of you. Okay, I've never heard someone so arrogant in all my life. Now cut the bullshit, please.
Do you understand how bad this is for a guild? You can't do it like this.
Do you understand what you do to guilds? Seriously, with an arrogance like that? And you just fuck off then.
Also not very happy with my rapidly growing monopoly on filth was Helman Gorst, whose rotting zombies couldn't compare to the nostril-curdling stench of Kugath. Seething with rage, he lashed out and started a war with us. So once again, I clump my army up in the corner and throw Kugath's sentient tumor nurglings at the vampires in order to bait them over to us. Meanwhile, Oedipus, who I forgot to embed into my army, shows up as a reinforcement on the other side of the map and had his own personal beef to settle with a random blue ghost riding a stagecoach in what is quite possibly the most pathetic battle I've ever seen.
You stop f***ing it in my car! You just f***ing smacked my car! You've just assaulted me, you. I'm calling the police! I'm calling the.
But back with the main group, it was neck and neck as Morbius and his chums pushed further and further into Kugath's Michi. However, with the vampires clumped together, I could use my recently unlocked Slop Wave to inflict damage on the majority of them and leave them in a trail of sticky McDonald's Sprite.
That's disgusting.
Eventually, their masses thinned, much like the non-existent hair on Gorst's moulded head. And finally, we had victory.
Don't come to my house or else I'll suck your dick.
With Gorst beaten back, I decided to forcefully repossess his settlement, starting with scrap towers. Gorst's forces were very strong, but not nearly as strong as the clump. Even enlisting the Romanian military to assist couldn't save him. But what would have been an easy conquest was made significantly harder once the stench of our combined forces wafted into ogre territories, forcing them to attempt to eliminate our perfectly foul odor.
I can smell you. I'm creeping around right now. Just can't see me.
Once again, I backed up into the corner and baited them over to us, using Kugath's ranged ability. Now, most men would be terrified of beasts of such a large size and stature, but being from Britain, I found a strange sense of familiarity in these guys. Like I was looking in a mirror, or perhaps like I was staring into the eyes of my local pub innkeeper. Either way, it pained me to have to thwart them with my green slime. I tried to rationalize it to myself as a charitable act of euthanasia. If I wasn't the one to finish these guys off, heart disease soon would be.
I'm having a heart attack.
With how easily I was winning, it began to feel like I was bullying both the elderly and the mentally slow. But as I'm Dark Triad Max, this activated my primordial urge to hunt the weak, and so I laid out my wallet for creative assembly and became their latest pay pig, as I shilled out a whopping 13 of our king's Great British Gold Bullion coins for access to more unethical units, including this giant, who I instantly grew a soft spot for and named Lenny. Using Lenny, my war with the ogres soon became no more than a simple blood sport. Admittedly, I found chasing after the ogres pretty funny, as they desperately waddled away, so in my sadistic compulsion, I forgot about Gorst and his vampires and instead pursued after the ogres, whittling down their settlements and finally arriving at their main city, Ruin's End Camp, where we charged in with Lenny and my new Chaos War Shrines to cleanse the gene pool of runts. While I had been busy with the ogres, my plagues had been spreading across the land nicely, and my empire of filth was growing, but still, despite doing various plague dances, had still only unlocked the greenpox recipe. However, after defeating an army, you can simmer down their remains in your plague cauldron and use your enemies' corpses to fuel more virulent plagues. So when Imric finally built up the courage to try and confront us for spreading our new strain of gonorrhea in his lands, he quickly realized that his DeviantArt dragon, an army of blonde TikTok food boys, were quite literally too milquetoast to withstand Kugath's foul body odor. We chased each individual one down in order to get as many kills as possible, and used their remains to increase our infection points. Now, from my position on the map, I could see the skaven scuttling around, desperately seething and coping as the price of our filth stocks skyrocketed. I could have struck at this point and wiped them out while they were still weak, but as a true gaming gentleman and strong abider of the Filth Guild's code of conduct, I would respect my competition in the market and would give them time to build their forces. Conveniently, soon after, I formed a military alliance with Astrogoth Ironhand and had been given military access access by the other Chaos Dwarf faction. So in order to give the Skaven some time, I recruited a new lord called Akold Bloodkeeper to lead my second army, which I would use to defend the homeland while I sent Kugath on a marketing tour, rolling his mobility scooter through dwarven lands and handing out free samples of terminal illnesses to both allies and enemies alike. F*** it. Why not? Since I had more or less researched every piece of technology to speed up the rate at which my plagues spread, all I had to do now was kamikaze spam my plague cultists into random settlements and armies. I did have a slight ulterior motive to travelling all the way up to the north of the map, and that was to reach Kislev's territory, where I would proceed to sit in the raiding stance for many, many turns. Why? Because fuck Kislev, and also because I was hovering dangerously close to bankruptcy due to the massive army upkeep fee each turn. So there I sat, suckling a pittance of loose cash out of the pockets of Kislev each turn. Eventually though, Dungrut, a fellow brother of Papa Nurgle's filth, proposed I join in a confederation with him, which of course I desperately accepted. Now with control of Dungrut, I commenced my trolling attempts on Charon of Gorhunt, Karen of Gorhunt? I have no clue. By raiding and looting their minor settlements, harassing and brutalizing their armies, and stimming with non-verbal joy, all while Kugath siphoned Kislev's wealth. But karma had finally caught up with me, as I was jump-scared by a notification heralding a vampiric apocalypse.
And it confirms the worst. Somehow
Helmengord returned.
Gorst was back, and somehow had multiple full armies of powerful, high-level troops.
See, buddy, I think you got the wrong door. The leather club's 2 blocks down.
Fuck you.
So with only Akold defending our home province, we were forced to defend our settlements from Gorst and his hordes of living Halloween decorations. With vampiric reinforcements instantly flooding into the scrap towers, my only option was to blob most of the army into the crevasse in the rocks, while a couple of squads attempted to sit on the flanks and push the vampires towards the main blob in order to trap them in and surround them, but their numbers were too high, and their experience massively outleveled that of my own armies. Eventually, we were crushed, and so we were handed our first decisive defeat. With this, Akold was slain, and it was time for Kugath to stop relying on Eastern Europeans for welfare and rush back home to defend with Dungrut. Ideally, I would have liked to wait for Kugath to slowly wheel himself back home before engaging with Gorst. With nearly every settlement taken over by cringeworthy Twilight vampires, I was forced to step in before they got too comfortable. Slightly on the back foot, but still standing a chance, my only option was to hold the line in a truly filthy war of attrition. For every win I would narrowly grasp, I'd be obliterated in the next few. Luckily, all of the fighting against high-level units gave me a smorgasbord of skills to spam into random defense upgrades and damage output increases. However, things were still looking bleak. Dungrut's army lacked the time or money to heal, as we were officially bankrupt. We were at our last bastion, and so began the Battle of Pigbarter. This would be the most decisive battle I had faced. With my units exhausted and clinging onto their last slivers of health, if we were wiped here, it would be very unlikely that Kugath would be able to stop these Nosferatu bastards alone. My plan was to swarm the small wave approaching from one side of the wall, while the rest of my army sat at the top of the fort and used the towers and defensive walls to hold them off for as long as possible, while my soul grinder would take pot shots at them as they ascended. I would have to defeat the first wave very quickly before their reinforcements arrived, and then pull back up to the top of the fort to assist the others before they were overwhelmed. Luckily for us, the enemy lord, stupidly named Dirk, flew up straight into some of my most powerful units, deciding to charge in and solo us alone. As the weaker force broke down our doors and clashed with my Nurglings and Plague Bearers, we managed to wear down Dirk, as lower down the ramp, Dungrut and his goons pushed up. With some enemies still left at the bottom of the hill, I set up a defensive barrier to section them off and ordered my soul grinder to spam fire down onto them. With Dirk killed and now runted into oblivion, I used the hill to plunge my chariots into the horde, give them permanent, life-altering injuries. With only a few vampires left idle at the bottom of the hill, my soul grinder fired a few streams of piss at them, and we had victory. The tide had begun to turn. Shortly after our win, Kugath had returned back home. Both literally and figuratively, we were so back. With only Shambletown left as Gorst's only settlement, the orcs even decided to join us in permanently sending Gorst back to the retirement home. We poured into the town, absolutely annihilated the vampires, and took our final victory against Gorst. His faction, the Caravan of Blue Roses, was done. We made an agreement with the orcs to not speak of our war crimes here, and then left at the settlement to deal with our last remaining competitor, the now much more powerful, still seething and coping Skaven clans. After this, we breezed through a pretty easy wipe, gradually grinding down each Skaven clan. First, Clan Rictus and Moors, who were steamrolled within about 20 minutes, all while using their territory as a ground zero for our new artisanal strand of aids. Our filthy shenanigans had given us enough experience to unlock Blight Boil, my personal favourite spell, as it creates a huge dirty bomb cyst which explodes with slime and pus and spills radiation onto our enemies. I also unlocked Fetid Stench for Dungrut, a passive area of effect ability that made Dungrut's body odour so foul that it actively demoralised surrounding units by lowering enemy leadership. Also, we recruited Uncle Furuncle, a great unclean one, who, while very slow, was an absolute tank. Finally, only Clan Carrion remained, with their forces concentrated in Nagashizar. The only line of defense they had outside of the city was a single dwarf.
Dude, back off.
So with all three of my armies positioned right outside the fort, ready to team up on it, we set our targets on the rats and moved to engage. With only one army currently on the battlefield, and the Skaven equipped with a lot of long-range weapons and artillery, if we didn't advance now, they could chew my ranks down from afar. My chances of victory were looking slim, and I had no option but to charge my whole force into the swarm.
Enemy spotted.
Right on time, however, the main bulk of my army stormed onto the battlefield, along with my two new soul grinders, who were able to mog the rats from afar with their piss guns. Although these weapons didn't do much damage, all we had to do was spam fire at them in order to harass them and keep them distracted from firing on the bulk of my forces. Meanwhile, the Skaven used this opportunity to once again try and one-up us by sending in this genetic mess. Whatever this was likely the result of our radioactive nuclear cysts that we had been spamming on our rat foes. Unfortunately for them, however, my special units were all qualified pest handlers and took turns bonking the abomination on the head until it developed severe brain damage and lost its final shred of sentience. Things were neck and neck as enemy reinforcements began pushing in, but gradually, between my soul grinders crippling their long-range units and their infantry being unable to cut through the slimy green flesh of my plague bearers, we pulled through and once again had defeated the rats. At this point, our plagues were spreading nicely across the map, and as my competition fell, so too did their stock price on the filth market. Finally, we had wiped out both Gorst and the Skaven clans. So there we have it. My enemies were gone, and a new era of filth and plagues was beginning to dawn, one completely under our control. In the end, we only managed to unlock greenpox, but maybe one high-quality, virulent product is better than a whole range of cheap plagues imported from China. So there we go. Let me know what you thought of this video, and if I should do another one on Total Warhammer 3. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time.
But you've just fucking put such a spanner in the works, mate. I do not want to play with you. I've never heard anyone so rude and arrogant as you. Seriously, you must be making up for something really small.
Let Nuff lead the raid, and maybe you can be quiet for the entire duration. That would be awesome.
If you were in front of me, I'd rip your fucking brains out. I'd seriously kill you.